The space station called Harmony's Edge floated in the dark between the stars. It was huge, bigger than most cities on Earth. Ships from many different worlds sat around it like metal flowers, their lights blinking in the darkness. Inside the station, beings from across the galaxy had come together for one last chance at peace. Dr. Hannah Lee sat at the human table, her small hands folded in her lap. She wore simple clothes and glasses that made her look like a teacher. Next to her, Ambassador Yuna Park checked her papers one more time. Park was tall and confident, the kind of person who made others listen when she spoke. On Park's other side, General Taeho Kim sat straight in his chair. His uniform was covered with medals that showed he had fought in many battles. The three humans looked very different from each other. Park wore expensive clothes that sparkled under the station's lights. Kim's uniform was perfect, not a single wrinkle anywhere. But Dr. Lee looked like she had just come from a library. Her clothes were plain and comfortable. She had a small computer tablet in front of her and she typed on it quietly. Other beings filled the great meeting room. The Zentari looked like tall, thin birds with blue feathers. They spoke in musical voices that sounded like singing. The Makari were short and round, with gray skin that looked like stone. They moved slowly but thought very fast. There were others too, some with many arms, some that glowed in the dark, some that looked almost like humans but with different colored skin. All of them were afraid. They were afraid because of the Kraltek Empire. The Kralteks had been taking over worlds for the past 10 years. They had destroyed 17 different species completely. When the Kralteks came to a world, they gave only one choice: join the Empire as slaves or die fighting. The doors to the meeting room opened with a loud bang. The Kraltek delegation walked in and everyone became quiet. Warprime Gorvash led them. He was 3 times taller than most humans, with skin that looked like black metal armor. Scars covered his body from many battles. His eyes were red and seemed to glow in the light. Behind him came 12 other Kraltek warriors, all almost as big and scary as their leader. Gorvash walked to the center of the room. His footsteps were so heavy that the floor shook a little with each step. He looked around at all the other beings and many of them looked down at their tables. Only a few, like General Kim, looked back at him without fear. The Warprime began to speak. His voice was like thunder, so loud that some of the smaller beings covered their ears. I am Warprime Gorvash of the Kraltek Empire. I have come to tell you how things will be from now on. He pressed a button and pictures appeared in the air above the tables. The pictures showed burning planets and broken ships floating in space. These are the worlds that tried to fight us. The Vorthak had strong defenses around their planets. The Hellion people had many allies. The Drakmar thought their weapons could stop us. They were all wrong. Ambassador Park tried to speak, but Gorvash held up his hand. I did not come here to listen to your words. I came to give you new orders. Half of your worlds now belong to the Kraltek Empire. Your people will work for us. Your ships will carry our soldiers. Your resources will feed our war machine. The room filled with worried voices. Some of the alien delegates started to cry. Others began talking quickly to their assistants. A few stood up like they wanted to leave, but Gorvash's warriors moved closer to the doors. During all of this noise and fear, Dr. Lee kept typing on her small computer. She did not look scared. She did not look angry. She looked like someone taking notes in a classroom. Sometimes she would look up and watch Gorvash speak, then go back to her typing. General Kim tried to argue with the Warprime. You cannot just take over peaceful worlds. The Galactic Council has rules about war. Gorvash laughed, a sound like breaking glass. Your Galactic Council is weak. Rules only matter if someone is strong enough to make others follow them. We are that strength. Dr. Lee raised her hand a little bit, like a student asking a question. Her voice was so soft that everyone had to stop talking to hear her. Excuse me, Warprime Gorvash. I hope you don't mind me asking, but I'm very interested in Kraltek biology. Could you tell me about your warrior training? And maybe about your ships? I'm writing a research paper. Gorvash looked down at her. She was so small compared to him that he could have stepped on her like a bug. He seemed confused that anyone would ask such simple questions at a time like this. But he was proud of his empire's power, so he began to answer. Kraltek warriors train from birth. We are stronger and faster than any other species. Our ships are built for war, not comfort. Each Devastator-class ship carries 15,000 warriors. Dr. Lee nodded and typed more notes. How interesting. And how many ships do you usually keep in a battle group? As Gorvash answered her questions, the other humans watched Dr. Lee with growing confusion. Why was she asking about such things when their entire civilization might be about to end? But she kept asking and Gorvash kept answering, enjoying the chance to brag about Kraltek's strength. Nobody in the room understood what Dr. Lee was really doing. They all thought she was just a scared scientist asking nervous questions. Even Ambassador Park and General Kim wondered why their colleague was wasting everyone's time. But Dr. Lee was not wasting time at all. 3 hours had passed since the meeting began. The air in the great room felt heavy and thick. Many of the alien delegates looked tired and scared. Some had already started whispering to their assistants about surrender. War Prime Gorvash stood at the center of the room like a dark mountain. He had been showing more pictures of destroyed worlds for the past hour. Each image was worse than the last. Cities turned to ash. Space stations broken into pieces. Whole populations gone forever. The Helix Coalition thought they were clever, Gorvash said, pointing to a picture of a dead planet. They hid their people in underground cities. We found them all. His red eyes seemed to glow brighter as he spoke. The Starwing Republic tried to run away to distant stars. Our ships are faster. There is no place in this galaxy where you can hide from the Kraltek Empire. Ambassador Park tried again to find some way to negotiate. She stood up slowly, her hands shaking just a little. War Prime, surely we can find a solution that benefits everyone. Trade agreements, resource sharing, peaceful cooperation. Gorvash cut her off with a wave of his massive hand. There is no cooperation with the Kraltek Empire. There is only service or death. You humans are new to space. You have been traveling between stars for less than 200 years. We have been conquering for thousands of years. The War Prime walked closer to the human table. Each step made the floor shake. He was so big that when he stood next to their table he blocked out the lights above them. Ambassador Park had to look up to see his face, and even General Kim seemed small next to the alien warrior. Your species thinks you are special because you survived your own world wars, Gorvash continued. Every species thinks they are special at first. The Makari thought their stone-like skin made them strong. The Zentari believed their ability to fly would save them. They all learned the truth in the end. Dr. Lee looked up from her computer tablet. She pushed her glasses up on her nose and raised her hand again like a student with a question. I'm sorry to interrupt, War Prime, but could you tell me more about how you organize your fleets? Do you keep your command ships in the center or at the edges of the formation? Several delegates stared at Dr. Lee like she was crazy. How could she ask such simple questions when they were all about to become slaves or die? But Gorvash seemed happy to answer. He liked talking about Kraltek military power. Command ships stay in the center, protected by battle cruisers, he said with pride. We learned this strategy from conquering the Thex Federation. They made the mistake of putting their commanders at the front of their fleets. Dr. Lee nodded and typed more notes. And how do you communicate between ships during battle? Do you use quantum transmitters or neural networks? Quantum transmitters mostly, but we have backup neural links for emergencies, Gorvash answered. Why do you ask so many questions about our military? Dr. Lee smiled softly. I'm a xenobiologist. I study how different species organize themselves. Military structure tells me a lot about a species' psychology and biology. While Dr. Lee asked her questions, the situation in the room got worse. The Makari delegate had put his head down on the table and would not look up. 2 of the Zentari were making soft crying sounds. The representative from the outer colonies kept looking at the doors like he wanted to run away. General Kim tried to speak up. War Prime, you say you are strong, but strength without honor is just brutality. The human military follows rules of war. We protect civilians. We treat prisoners with respect. Gorvash laughed again, that terrible sound like glass breaking. Honor? Rules? These are words that weak species use to make themselves feel better about losing. He pressed another button, and new pictures appeared in the air. This is what happens to species that talk about honor and rules. The new images were even more horrible than before. They showed Kraltek warriors destroying hospitals and schools. Ships full of refugees being blown up as they tried to escape. Entire cities being bombed while white flags flew from every building. We do not make war on your soldiers only, Gorvash said. We make war on your hope. When a species has no hope left, they stop fighting. It is much easier that way. Some of the delegates started to make choking sounds. Others covered their eyes. The representative from New Geneva stood up suddenly and ran toward the door, but one of the Kraltek warriors stepped in front of him. The human sat back down quickly, his face white with fear. Dr. Lee raised her hand once more. War Prime, I hope you don't mind another question. When you take over a new planet, how do you decide which buildings to keep and which ones to destroy? Is there a standard procedure, or does each commander make those decisions? Each sector commander makes his own choices, Gorvash answered. But we always destroy centers of learning first. Schools, libraries, universities. Knowledge makes species think they can resist. Ambassador Park stared at Dr. Lee with confusion and growing worry. Why was her colleague asking about such terrible things so calmly? It was like she was taking notes for a school report while people talked about genocide. But Dr. Lee just kept typing and asking questions, her voice always soft and polite, her manner always respectful. She asked about supply lines and communication systems. She asked about how many troops could fit on different types of ships. She asked about Kraltech biology and culture and technology. And Gorvash kept answering, proud to share the details of his empire's power with someone who seemed so interested. The fourth hour of the meeting had begun, and many of the smaller delegations were ready to give up. The representative from the Canis sector had already signed a surrender document. 3 other species were preparing to do the same. The room felt like a funeral where everyone was still alive but knew they would not be for much longer. Warprime Gorvash stood at his podium, watching the aliens prepare to become his slaves. His red eyes gleamed with satisfaction. This was always his favorite part of conquest, the moment when hope died in his enemy's eyes. You are wise to accept reality, he told the room. The Kraltech Empire is generous to those who do not resist. Your children will grow up as Kraltech citizens. They will forget the weak ways of their ancestors. Dr. Lee closed her computer tablet with a soft click. The sound was very quiet, but somehow everyone in the room heard it. She stood up slowly, pushing her chair back from the table. Ambassador Park looked at her with surprise. General Kim frowned, wondering what his colleague was doing. Dr. Lee walked toward the center of the room. Her footsteps were almost silent, but something about the way she moved made conversations stop. She was still small and quiet, still wearing her simple clothes and wire glasses. But something had changed. The air around her felt different, like the moment before lightning strikes. Warprime Gorvash, she said in her soft voice. May I speak to the assembly? Gorvash looked down at her with amusement. The little scientist wants to say something? Very well. Speak your final words before you join the Empire. Dr. Lee walked to the podium where Gorvash had been standing. She was so much smaller than him that she had to adjust the microphone down to reach it. But when she spoke, her whisper somehow filled the entire room. Warprime Gorvash, son of Thrax the Conqueror, born on the military world of Colin Prime, she began. You graduated first in your class from the Colin War Academy 28 years ago. You have commanded 43 successful invasions. You have 3 wives and 7 children back on your home world. The room became completely silent. Gorvash's eyes widened. How could this small human woman know such personal details about his life? Dr. Lee continued, her voice still gentle but somehow growing more powerful. You have a genetic condition called Rexoth syndrome that makes you sensitive to certain sound frequencies. Specifically, sounds between 2.4 and 2.7 kHz cause you severe pain and temporary paralysis. Gorvash took a step backward. His hand moved toward the weapon at his side, but he seemed frozen with shock. Your flagship is the battleship World Render, constructed 15 years ago at the Vengrak shipyards, Dr. Lee went on. It carries a crew of exactly 12,847 beings. The ship has a critical weakness in its portside power coupling system that was never fully repaired after the Battle of Nexus 5. The other Kraltech warriors in the room began to look nervous. Their leader was supposed to be mysterious and all-powerful. How could a quiet human scientist know so much about him? Dr. Lee touched her computer tablet, and holographic displays appeared in the air above the assembly. The displays showed detailed maps of the space around the station. Red dots marked the positions of Kraltech ships, hundreds of them arranged in attack formations. Your fleet consists of 2,341 vessels positioned at these exact coordinates, Dr. Lee said, pointing to the display. 17 Devastator-class battleships, 43 heavy cruisers, 126 destroyers, 289 assault transports, and 1,866 fighter craft. Each ship's weapons, shields, crew complement and tactical capabilities are documented here. Ambassador Park's mouth fell open. General Kim stared at the displays with growing understanding and amazement. But Dr. Lee was not finished. The holographic display changed to show detailed biological information about Kraltech physiology. Diagrams of their internal organs, genetic markers, chemical vulnerabilities, and psychological profiles filled the air. The average Kraltech warrior has enhanced muscle density but reduced flexibility, she explained in her calm, academic voice. Your species has excellent night vision but is partially blind to certain wavelengths of light. Your battle armor is nearly impenetrable to energy weapons but has specific weak points at the neck and knee joints. Gorvash finally found his voice. How do you know these things? We have never shared this information with humans. Dr. Lee smiled for the first time since the meeting began. It was not a friendly smile. War Prime, for the past 20 years, I have been studying every species in this galaxy. My research papers on xenobiology have been published in universities across known space. I have attended conferences on dozens of worlds. I have interviewed thousands of beings from hundreds of species. She paused and looked directly into Gorvash's red eyes. Including many former prisoners of war from species you have conquered. They were very willing to share what they learned about their captors. The truth began to dawn on everyone in the room. Dr. Lee had not been asking innocent questions for the past few hours. She had been confirming information she already possessed. Every polite inquiry about fleet positions and military tactics had been a test to see if Gorvash would reveal the truth. You are not a simple scientist, Gorvash said, his voice much quieter than before. Dr. Lee adjusted her glasses and spoke in the same soft tone she had used all day. I am Dr. Hannah Lee, Director of the Human Intelligence Services Xenological Threat Assessment Division. Everything you have told me today matches our existing intelligence files perfectly. Dr. Lee touched her tablet again, and the holographic display changed. Now it showed the space around Harmony's Edge Station, but this time there were many more dots on the map. Blue dots appeared everywhere, above, below, and surrounding the red Kraltek fleet positions. War Prime Gorvash, you asked how I know so much about your empire, Dr. Lee said, her quiet voice carrying clearly through the silent room. The answer is simple. Humanity has been preparing for this day for 23 years. The blue dots on the display began to move. They formed patterns around the Kraltek ships like a net closing around fish. There were hundreds of them, far more than anyone had expected. When humans first learned about the Kraltek Empire, we began what we called the Long Watch Project, Dr. Lee explained. We studied every species you had conquered. We talked to every refugee who escaped your attacks. We learned your language, your culture, your military tactics, and your weaknesses. Gorvash stared at the display in shock. Those are human ships? Impossible. Our sensors would have detected them. Dr. Lee nodded politely. Yes, they are human ships. And no, your sensors could not detect them. We have been developing stealth technology specifically designed to hide from Kraltek detection systems. Every piece of equipment on your ships, every scanning frequency you use, every method you employ to find hidden enemies, we know about all of it. She walked closer to the holographic display and pointed to different groups of blue dots. These are Phantom-class stealth cruisers. These are Whisper-class destroyers. And these larger signatures are our new Guardian-class battleships, each one designed specifically to counter Kraltek Devastator ships. Ambassador Park finally understood what she was seeing. Hannah, you mean our entire diplomatic mission was an intelligence-gathering operation, Dr. Lee finished. Yes, Ambassador Park. We knew the Kralteks would eventually demand this meeting. We knew they would bring their fleet to intimidate everyone into surrender. And we knew they would reveal their final tactical positions when they felt completely safe. General Kim leaned forward in his chair. How long have our ships been in position? 6 weeks, Dr. Lee answered. We began moving stealth vessels into this sector long before the peace talks were announced. Every day we gathered more information about Kraltek fleet movements, communication patterns, and defensive strategies. The alien delegates around the room began to whisper among themselves. The Makari representative lifted his head from the table for the first time in hours. The Zentari stopped making their sad crying sounds. Hope began to return to faces that had looked ready for death. But Dr. Lee was not finished. She touched her tablet once more, and the display zoomed in on Gorvash's flagship, the World Render. Detailed schematics appeared, showing every deck, every weapon system, every critical component. Your ship has 847 separate systems that could be targeted, she said in her academic tone. Power generators, weapon batteries, shield projectors, life support, artificial gravity, navigation, communications. We have identified the exact sequence needed to disable your flagship without destroying it. Gorvash's hands began to shake. You would attack a diplomatic meeting? Dr. Lee shook her head. War Prime, you just spent 4 hours telling this assembly that you came here not to negotiate but to give orders. You showed us images of genocide and promised to destroy our civilizations. This stopped being a diplomatic meeting the moment you threatened to murder billions of innocent people. She gestured to the holographic display, where the blue dots had completely surrounded the red ones. But we are not here to start a war. We are here to end one before it begins. The small scientist walked back toward Gorvash, her quiet footsteps echoing in the silent room. Despite being less than half his size, somehow she seemed to tower over the massive alien warrior. "Every question I asked you today was a final confirmation of intelligence we already possessed," she said. "Fleet positions, communication systems, command structures, supply lines, biological vulnerabilities, everything we needed to know to defeat your empire completely." Dr. Lee stopped directly in front of Gorvash and looked up at him through her wire-rimmed glasses. "The trap was not set today, War Prime. The trap was set 23 years ago when humanity first learned of your existence. Today you simply walked into it." The War Prime's red eyes darted around the room as if looking for an escape, but there was nowhere to run. His fleet was surrounded. His weaknesses were exposed. His empire's military secrets had been uncovered by a species he had dismissed as weak and new to space. "What do you want?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Dr. Lee smiled that same cold smile from before. "That is an interesting question, War Prime. What we want depends entirely on what you choose to do next. You have two options." She held up one finger. "Option 1, you order your fleet to attack. In that case, you will discover exactly how well humanity prepared for this moment. Your ships will be destroyed, your empire will fall, and your people will face the same fate you have given to 17 other species." She held up a second finger. "Option 2, you sit down at this table and we begin real negotiations. Not demands or threats, but actual diplomacy between equals." The room waited in perfect silence for Gorvash's answer. The silence stretched for what felt like hours, though only minutes passed. War Prime Gorvash stood frozen, his massive frame trembling slightly as he stared at the holographic display showing his trapped fleet. The red eyes that had seemed so fierce and confident now looked uncertain and afraid. Around the room, other delegates watched with amazement. They had come to this meeting expecting to surrender or die. Now they were watching the most powerful military force in the galaxy being outmaneuvered by a quiet human woman who looked like a librarian. Finally, Gorvash spoke. His voice was much quieter than before, almost as soft as Dr. Lee's whisper. "If I choose to fight, how many of my people will survive?" Dr. Lee consulted her tablet, scrolling through data with the same calm manner she had shown all day. "Based on our tactical analysis, approximately 12% of your fleet would escape the initial engagement. Those ships would be hunted down over the following weeks. Total Kraltech military losses would be 97.4%. The War Prime closed his red eyes for a moment. When he opened them again, something had changed. The arrogance was gone. The cruel confidence had disappeared. For the first time in his long career of conquest, Gorvash looked like someone who understood he could lose. "And if I choose to negotiate?" he asked. "Then your empire survives," Dr. Lee answered simply. "Your people return home safely. Your worlds remain yours. And we begin building something better than endless war." Gorvash looked around the room at all the species he had planned to enslave. The Makari delegate sat up straighter in his chair. The Zentari had stopped crying and were watching him with cautious hope. Even the small colonies that had been ready to surrender now looked at him with curiosity instead of fear. The War Prime walked slowly to the negotiation table and sat down heavily in the chair designed for Kraltech physiology. The chair creaked under his weight, but it held. "I choose to negotiate," he said quietly. A sound like a collective sigh filled the room as dozens of species realized they would live to see another day. Some delegates began crying, but these were tears of relief, not despair. Others started talking excitedly to their assistants, already making plans for a future they had thought was lost. Dr. Lee nodded and touched her tablet. The holographic display changed to show trade routes, resource-sharing agreements, and scientific exchange programs. "These are preliminary proposals for integrating the Kraltech Empire into the galactic community as partners rather than conquerors." For the next 2 hours, real negotiations began. Ambassador Park took the lead on diplomatic protocols while General Kim discussed military cooperation and peacekeeping operations. Dr. Lee continued to provide information and analysis, but she let others handle the actual bargaining. The Kraltechs, it turned out, were not naturally evil. They had become conquerors because their home worlds were running out of resources, and war seemed like the only way to survive. When presented with alternatives like trade agreements and shared technology, they began to see new possibilities. As the talks progressed, Gorvash found himself looking at Dr. Lee with a mixture of respect and confusion. During a break in negotiations, he approached her private table where she was organizing her notes. "Dr. Lee," he said, his voice still much quieter than when he had first entered the room. "May I ask you something?" She looked up from her work and nodded politely. Of course, War Prime. Why did humans send you to this meeting? Your ambassador is skilled, your general is experienced, but you were the real weapon all along, were you not? Dr. Lee cleaned her glasses with a soft cloth before answering. War Prime, humans learned long ago that the loudest person in a room is rarely the most dangerous one. People who need to prove their strength usually do not have as much as they claim. She gestured toward the ongoing negotiations where Ambassador Park was working out details of mineral rights and General Kim was discussing border patrol cooperation. My colleagues are excellent at their jobs. But sometimes the most important work happens before anyone realizes there is work to be done. Gorvash sat down in a chair across from her, moving carefully so as not to loom over the small woman. Your species seems to have many individuals like you. Quiet ones who see everything and say little. Every species has such individuals, Dr. Lee replied. The difference is that humans have learned to listen to them. We put our quiet thinkers in positions where they can do the most good. We give them time to study and plan and prepare. She looked out through the viewing ports at the mixed fleets of human and Kraltech ships, no longer enemies but not yet friends. Other species often promote their loudest members, their strongest fighters, their most aggressive leaders. But humans learned that wars are usually won before the first shot is fired, by people who think rather than people who shout. Gorvash nodded slowly. So when humans enter a room, I should watch for the quiet ones? Dr. Lee smiled, the first genuinely warm expression she had shown all day. War Prime, when humans enter a room, you should assume that we already know everything important about everyone present. The quiet ones are just the proof of how much homework we did before we arrived. As the day ended and preliminary peace accords were signed, word spread quickly throughout the galaxy. The Kraltech Empire had been stopped not by a great battle, but by careful preparation and quiet intelligence. Other species began to look at humanity with new respect and perhaps a little fear. The galaxy had learned an important lesson. The most dangerous human in any room was usually the one you never noticed was there.